So Yossi, tell me a little bit about yourself as a coach.
So I don't really refer to myself as a coach. I'm a transformational guide. In essence, the difference between that is most coaches, I find, go through like certification programs and study and then have like processes that come from very defined spaces. Where for me, everything that I do is through personal experience, things that I have created on my own, understandings on deeper levels than just coaching structures. So I've been able to dive in really deep into my life across many aspects through emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, challenging different aspects of my life, living around the world, connecting with different cultures, different people, everybody from students to entrepreneurs. And so I have a different type of grasp on these things, not taking anything away from coaching, but my approach is rooted in a very different type of process than general coaching usually is these days.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about that process. Like, what's a rough idea of some of the things that you do?
So I really focus in on self-awareness. That's pretty much my first pillar. And it really encapsulates everything. So self-awareness helps touch on emotional intelligence and also spiritual awarenesses, things like that. Not necessarily religious, but spiritual types of practices. So that self-awareness is super important, and it's where everything that I do starts from. And then one of my most fundamental pillars is integration, because information without integration is simply entertainment.
I love the way that you say that, man. So a phrase that I use that's similar but contrast is there's a gap between having the knowledge to say something and the wisdom to feel it, right? So we can all learn all of these concepts and have these ideas and read all these books, but until you're actually ready to have the wisdom to feel that, to step into that role, it's just there. It's just entertainment, as you would say. So who are some of the people that you help?
So really, I help people that are lost at some point in time in their life, taking them from lost to aligned and empowered. And that's a really deep process. My personal journey touches on that very significantly. I didn't always do this. It's always been a part of who I am, but not necessarily like how I showed up in the spaces that I offered my services. I was in fashion for like 20 years, and so we can get into like that journey later. But ultimately, my story comes from a place of living a life by design. And so I got out of high school, started my first business, and took the hits and the punches as an entrepreneur, working for myself my whole life. Like, finances are in that game and space. So I'm not saying that I've been a millionaire and have done that, but I've been able to live a life that is aligned with my values and been able to follow that journey the way that it kind of serves me and everybody as best I possibly can. But I literally lived a life by design. I did what I wanted, when I wanted, where I wanted. I started my first business in 2000. And then, I lived in 11 countries. I worked in fashion, and so I was at sitting front row fashion weeks, and I was walking as a model, and I lived in London and Milan and did work in New York and LA and Berlin and Japan and all these places. And I was always very expressive in terms of showing up who I am, not peacocking, we used to call it, just to be here I am, but I just kind of always wore what I wanted. That was a gift handed down from my mom, where she just kind of showed up. It wasn't about designers, it was about just expressing who she was. And so I was never told who to work with, I was never told how to dress, where to be, or what to do. And those were significant pillars in my life. And so through the navigation of that, taking the hits, doing the thing, but ultimately everything was super by design. I was married to a wonderful partner, which ended, but we're still really, really close. And so all my relationships also, very mindful. And then I got to a place at 41 years old where nothing made sense anymore. And I was like, now what? I don't want more of this. But usually you hear people being like, I used to work in corporate, or I was in a terrible relationship, and all of a sudden I broke free and now I'm reconstructing my life, which for a lot of people, and that's super fair and everyone's got their journey. But for me, it was like, how have I lived a life by design? And it doesn't serve me anymore. Because I'm a really mindful person, and I did things by design. And as I flowed through one thing to another, I did that very mindfully. And so I was like, how did I get to where I am now? And so that's pretty much what kind of catalyzed my journey into really leaning into not what I do, but who I am. And that led me into challenging a lot of different types of things about who I thought I was, about the world, and in ways where I just disappeared from the world to figure it out. So no outside influence in regards to like my friends, my family, like my, no partners. I was like, I need to challenge a lot of things right now, and I need to understand myself deeply. And so my journey has been through emotional and like through emotions and spirituality my whole life. But I finally released who I was, like what I did. And I was like, now I'm just gonna like stay with who I am. And that's kind of where everything inspired from there.
That's quite the journey, especially over that 20-year course, right? We all have ups, downs, and we go sideways. But tell me more about this transitional phase of going from letting go of who you were and coming into who you are now. What did that period of time in your life look like? What were some of the things that came up?
I hit like quite a wonderful milestone in my career. And I was the opening keynote speaker at the Fashion Innovation Summit in Moldova. And people from all over the world, very reputable companies were invited. And when I got off that stage, I was just like, I think I'm done. And so my journey, in essence, I didn't know what to do. I mean, this type of transformational space isn't like, oh, I just knew what the next step was. So I was talking to a friend of mine, telling my situation, how I was feeling, and kind of what was going on in my life. At that point in time in the year, things were going fairly well, but a lot of things weren't. A lot of people were disappearing from my life for various reasons, whether I stepped away or they stepped away from me. Things I was trying to do in my business, like just kind of were starting to fall apart, and like I couldn't trust my intuition anymore. And I was just like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I need a moment. And so I spoke to a friend of mine. He taught me a really valuable lesson, but I spoke to a friend of mine, and I was like, it was like November at that time. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm like, I think I'm just gonna go and hang out at my parents' place and just like save some money, live in their second bedroom, just like chill and just like do my thing, and then take a few months just to relax and reassess, and then like, see what, the following year in February looks like. And he didn't look at me, we were talking on the phone, but he's like, can I be honest with you, man? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, you're one of the most, important people in my life, of course. And he's like, the idea of you going to your parents' house and staying in their second bedroom to save some money while you figure things out sounds depressing as fuck. He's like, I know you. He's like, get on an airplane and don't stop. He's like, that's where you're the most inspired, the most connected, and the most yourself. And I learned a really valuable lesson there, and it's that the reason why a lot of advice doesn't help people is because people don't include the context of the person they're talking to. And so that's what I personally feel is very wrong with a big issue with the coaching industry, is that it's like structures and ask questions and do this, and like everybody applies, but they don't. I didn't apply to that. And so I think that including the context creates deeper connections and conversations and journeys for people outside of like, do this and you'll be okay. Trust me, I took a course. Sure. And there are some wonderful coaches out there. I'm not taking anything away from people's personal processes. As a coach also, you evolve, you grab things, you change it, don't get me wrong. But as an industry, I think there's a lot of flaws there right now. So ultimately, what ended up happening was, I was like, you're fucking right. So I appreciate the honesty. I booked a one-way trip to Thailand. I had a bunch of points, and so I treated myself to a flight direct. I landed in Koh Samui, and I was like, cool. I'm like, I got myself a nice bungalow up by the water, super secluded, very remote, nice and quiet. And I was like, I'll get to Thailand and I'll like sleep, and I'll do yoga, and I'll meditate, and I'll smoke some weed, and I'll have some drinks, and I'll just like hang out by the beach. And like, I was like, all these things. And so I got there, I checked in, I was pretty exhausted. So the next day I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm gonna start my flow now. And I remember sitting down and closing my eyes and just feeling scared and judged and unsafe and like guilty, and like all these things just started showing up. And I've had a meditation practice my whole life, but this was the first time I was really sitting as the beginning of this next flow with everything that was going on in my life. And so I opened up my eyes fast. I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, oh my God. And then I had to really sit and be like, okay, well, why did those things show up? You know? And so, you know, one of the things was challenging things about myself that made me feel guilty. Because the way that I see it, it's like, if something makes you feel guilty, that means there's a party that wants to do it. And this isn't about harming other people or anything. This was about my behaviors, my actions. And one of them was just not doing anything. My whole thing was to go not do anything. But then I felt guilty if I wasn't doing yoga, if I wasn't meditating, if I wasn't journaling, if I wasn't, because often we look at personal professional development. So if you're not working on if you're not at work, well then you have time for all these other activities. And I was like, why am I not okay with just doing nothing? And so I challenged myself and I said, okay, what if I commit to being lazy forever? Because I know where the other way goes. And that didn't serve me. So it wasn't like, oh, I'll be lazy for a week and see how that feels. I'm like, I had to commit. So Albert Einstein says that you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. So that means that physiologically, biologically, you have to rewire your brain. It's not about thinking differently and slowly doing these things. Like I had to make some really drastic changes so my entire circuitry would evolve and really just kind of like pop in a different way. And so I got into that, and it took me a while to just be okay with just existing. Right? We were just at the retreat, right? We did the Hoi An Wellness Week, right? And you were one of the people there, and everyone had their experiences, and it was interesting because the way that I crafted the schedule is that in between each session was a 2-hour gap. And some people come to me and said like, so what am I supposed to do? Like I have all this time now, like I don't know what to do with myself. And I'm like, why do you feel like you have to do something with yourself? Why can't you just breathe and sit? I mean, it's a week that you bought it, you bought the ticket for it. You know that you're here for the whole week. You have another session coming up. You can take your computer. You can go for a swim. But people are so caught up with having to do something. And so that was a big thing for me. It was like, I need to be okay with just existing, like point blank. And then a lot of other things I challenge in my life and stuff. But that was kind of the journey of that self-awareness of being like, okay, right? Like releasing an identity like that no longer serves you, right? Like that's what people say when they talk about having an ego death, right? They're like, oh, I had an ego death, which isn't really possible. But they're saying that they release an identity that no longer serves them. And so they lean into wherever the rest of it, takes them. But that was the start of my journey. And I think that the most important thing that I can say about that is like, and why it was so profound was because I took away everything that I thought I was, or that I wanted to be, or that I felt proud of creating and all of that. And when I stripped everything away, I was left with my emotions and my spirituality. And that's really where everything that I do now stem from.
I get a lot of resonance with that story in my own transformation when I left the US to get into coaching and develop that for myself. It was, who am I without all of this? Left behind my 10-year career, I left behind my 3-bedroom house, everything that I owned, and I came here with a backpack. Who am I without all of this? Who are you without your past? Those emotions, that spirituality, how can you lean into that? And how can you be okay just being there with yourself without anything else? Is that something that you help people with that are lost?
Yeah, it's a big part of it, like I said, like I guide people from being lost to aligned and empowered, and like it's more than just a tagline, it's really the journey from there, right? Being like, well, now what? And we're seeing so much with it because, I started becoming an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur when I was 19 in the year 2000. But back then, not many people were. Back then, it was very different. But I'd say around like 2014, 2016, entrepreneurship became like more of like a pop. People that just had ideas and wanted to start doing their own thing was way more, now it's super predominant, but it started like building up in that space. So now we're looking at it where it's like a 10-year lens, where now people they don't feel fulfilled. They follow their dream path and their life choices. Some of them have wild amount of money, or have had the experiences that they wanted. They've checked everything off their bucket list and they're like, so now what? And it shows up for different people in different ways. Sometimes it could show up in like somebody's lifestyle where they work corporate, were in a relationship they didn't enjoy, they didn't know enough about themselves, so they're too scared to live. So it wasn't even really, but then we have also people who live lives by design, and then they get to a point and they're like, now what? Whether it's their relationships or their connection to self that has suffered, whether they realize that success doesn't equal fulfillment, and still being so young, right? Like I'm 44 next month. And so I got to that place when I was 41, 42, and I was like, am I done? Another 50 years of doing this? I don't know if I have anything else to do here. Like, it wasn't a suicidal conversation. I mean, I was going through my emotional space, but it wasn't like, but I was just being really honest with myself. And I was like, I've checked off so many things on my bucket list. And so that was like the big thing for me, and for a lot of people that I really helped to like just, go from being lost and being like, now what? How can I be feeling like this after everything I've accomplished and the life that I've had? And it's different for everybody because there's different starting points, right? Everyone's got a different zero. Everyone's got a different starting point. And so it's really about that. And I think that the difference, like I was saying, was because there's a lot of wonderful transformational guides out there. And I think that that's a much more powerful space because it's people that have gone through stuff, but experienced stuff, right? No transformational guide has sat there and just like read a bunch of books and feel like that makes sense. I think that and I don't want to knock down the coaching industry. I know some wonderful coaches, like I said. But I think that a lot of people don't have life experience, but they want to help people. And I think that's wonderful. But I think that the type of clients are very different in that space. And I think that it's important to experience life because of the insights, the emotional depth, the spiritual journey. And like I said, it's not a religious journey, but it's like a journey of the depth of self in relation to everything inside and outside. And I think it's super important these days to really be able to come from a place of beyond compassion, but like a place of empathy. It doesn't matter if you've experienced the same thing, but to understand the emotional depths that it takes to experience very specific things, I think is super important. And I think what a lot of people are struggling with, because people don't need information and strategies. Right. They don't need that anymore. You can get that on YouTube, you can get that on ChatGPT, you can do that and like get it anywhere. Like that's not what's needed right now. People are starting to feel. They're starting to be so self-aware where they're challenging who they are, even when it's painful. Even when that means changing their entire life, their relationships, who they are, and everything else that goes along with what they do and how they show up and how they feel, how they communicate. Like these are bigger conversations. And I think that they're really important to be having right now.
I keep hearing you bring up the distinction between coaching and a spiritual guide. And my personal view on it is different, and that's okay. But I think that it's really interesting the lens that you hold coaching in versus, for me, the point of this podcast is to sit down with people and get their part of that story. And almost every single one so far has been through something, and they're looking to hold space for people who've been through exactly that.
Beautiful.
So tell me more about where this lens that you hold coaching in came from.
Sure. So I don't claim to be like a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
I am a transformational guide in a lot of these spaces. And so that comes with emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. Some people could say that there's some dogmatic spaces there, but I try to stay away from the religious thing, and I try to guide people through their own journeys. And I know that that's a lot of what coaching does. But from my experience of what I'm seeing online, the courses that are being offered, the certifications that are out there, and through general experience of my own, a big part of it was like, there wasn't enough life experience to work with someone like me on their side of things. Right. And it just felt like structures and, like reading, like I read The Coaching Trap. So I know how to ask more questions now and not help, not try to give, and it's like, everything just felt so like empty, where I was like, I can read the books that you read and I can apply them much better than this is going on. Like, you're talking to me because of things that sound good, but they don't contain the nuances of who I am in this conversation. And so like, everything kind of felt like that. And like I said, I know some wonderful coaches. There's some beautiful conscious coaches out there. Like, that's a thing, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not downing people specifically. I'm just talking about like the general aspect. And don't get me wrong, like, this isn't even just like, there's just a lot going on right now because people are trying to serve, and there's so many courses out there, you know what I mean? Like, be an Ayurvedic practitioner in 3 weeks with our course. And like, so you know what I mean? So like, what I'm trying to say is that like, a lot of the coaches are not personalized enough. They don't have enough experience within certain spaces. And I think everyone's trying to be that. And I think that these are very important spaces to be super aware of. You're entering people's lives. You're opening up a lot of conversations, a lot of emotional depth. And it's not just about asking questions and guiding them. It's about having the awareness and the depth to guide people through stuff they're really going with, like, and like I said, there's wonderful people out there serving people. I just seen the effects that coaching has had on many other people, and I try not to associate myself with that term. People can say that we do the same things, and if people are doing the same things in the context that we're talking about right now, then that is beautiful. You can call yourself whatever you want. Sure. But when we're talking about the connotations with these words in the market, in the industry, in the way that the world is going, I step away from the coach, because I just feel that there's a lot more depth out there, and I think there's a lot of connotations that don't sit well. And I'm not trying to define or prove myself through that lens. I've kind of found one that sits with me.
Absolutely, man. We all have our own journeys. And one of the things that I do, and one of the things that you do, is align people with their values, right? My opinion is that all of our goals should be getting everybody aligned with themselves, in the way that you say, getting people aligned and empowered. And you're in line with yourself in terminology that works well for you. So tell me more about your process. How do you help people become aligned and empowered? And how do you hold space for the depth that you're seeing?
Through radical self-awareness and very deep, profound authenticity. That's the most fundamental way. I don't work with people who, I don't try to convince people that they should change or live a better life or do different things. I usually work with people who are already on the path. They're like, I've made a choice to step away from relationships and lives and identities that no longer serve me. I'm ready for that. Now what? Because I have no idea what to do with that, and it's fucking terrifying, but I want to do it. Those are the people that I work with, and so that's really where we start. Because radical self-awareness and deep authenticity is super important, because this transformational journey is terrifying, and it should be. It's also very comforting and very liberating and very empowering, but it's like, one of the biggest questions I had to ask myself was, what happens if I go on this journey and I get up on the other side of this and I've lost everyone? My family doesn't recognize me anymore. They don't believe in my values or my morals. My brothers no longer have anything to talk to me about because I'm now seeing things through a different lens, and I'm creating separation or distance, or they just don't feel the connection with me anymore. What if that means that I have to leave my partner, right? I mean, at that point in time, I had left my partner, but I was already on the journey of being like, I know that there's things that I need to do to get to where I need to go to create the space where I can really lean in. But these are questions that people need to ask themselves. What happens if you have 3 kids and a partner, and you go through this, and then you come on the other side and it's time to say goodbye? That doesn't mean it has to be a toxic space, but it's like, what happens? Are you willing to do that for yourself? And that's like that deep authenticity, right? That's that deep self-awareness. Now, also, not everyone has to do this work. Not everyone has to be so profound. If you're happy and you don't need to be ecstatic and super fulfilled, that's okay. If you're successful and calm with your life and like what's the point? Because you're great in your religious sect and you're a good person in that space and you do good by other people and you've got a wife and these kids and like, you know, or you've been working in this corporation and you enjoy the community there, like, so you don't have to love your life every day, but like you enjoy showing up to work. Like, there's various degrees of all of this. I don't think there's like everyone needs to be an entrepreneur or, you know, like live this freedom life, because, you know, I talk to people about this often, especially because of, you know, the life that I've been living for the last 25 years. And people are like, oh, like, you know, I see you living and like you're so lucky. And I'm just like, why? I'm not lucky. I've decided to create a life by design, and that no longer served me. Now I'm starting to lean into another space, but like traveling around the world and doing these things, like there comes a lot of emotional spaces there. Like there's levels of like insecurity, there's levels of instability, there's levels of loneliness, there's like, and you need to be the type of person who can lean into that kind of stuff, because if you make $250,000 a year at a corporate job and you can turn off your brain at 6 p.m. and get your weekends and holidays and get benefits for your family and have the car and the beautiful house and have the stability and just be able to take care, like that is beautiful. Even 80,000 a year, 60,000 a year. But the point is that like, it's really about that deep self-awareness, because I can never sit in an office. I couldn't do it. A friend of mine asked me one time, he's like, if I promised you $3 million at the end of 3 years, and you had to just go to work every day and you're guaranteed the 3 million after that, would you do it? And I was like, impossible. I couldn't even imagine how suffocating that would be for me to not be in my own spaces, to travel, to grow, to evolve through like the way that my life flows. That's authenticity for me, and that's my self-awareness space. Like that $3 million isn't worth it, because maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't, right? Like I don't think I need to be a billionaire to prove that I am a successful entrepreneur. I go through life experiences and I go through my value structure based on what I define as success and fulfillment. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, without radical self-awareness, which leans into deep authenticity in terms of how you express and how you show up and how you relate, and, you know, like, then you're really sitting on nothing. It's just an empty space of connecting to different identities that sound good and different ways of showing up because you think maybe that'll get you something, or maybe that's what other people need or want, or it'll make you feel more comfortable in those spaces. Like, so those are the defining spaces, like yeah, I mean, it relies super heavily on both of those things.
A question that I ask myself that I often just sit there and wonder is, would my life be simpler if I just never started? And
Never started what?
The journey inward. And because when you crave depth, you automatically make your life complex through the things that we do, right? And I look at other people who have the simple jobs and the simple lives, and they just go to work and they come home and they have their spouses and they have their houses, and part of me goes, I wonder if that wouldn't be better. But then I think back to the start of my journey at 25, having achieved the American dream, being high up in a company and owning a house and all that, and being absolutely fucking miserable. I would never want to start over, but it's a little bit exhausting to go to the depths that we do, to look into the things that we do, and being open to your core and just being in touch with who you are. But that level of authenticity is irreplaceable.
Yeah, it's a valid point, and I totally appreciate that, the openness for you to share that, because it is like, you know, I was working with this client, we were working together for a few years, and at the beginning, at the start of it, we were going pretty deep, and, you know, she was confronting a lot of things, and we were working through those, and one day we were talking, and she was like, so Yossi, she's like, when does this end? Right? And I told her, I said, it never does. But the point is that most people never start.
Yeah.
And so that's really where it comes down, because the way that this journey works is the more that you can face yourself, the bigger things you can face about yourself. And that's why it feels like it gets so much harder. It doesn't. You get stronger. You're able to dive deeper into things that you can't handle at first, and that's totally okay. Everyone's got their own process and flow. But when you can really lean in and go deeper and deeper and deeper, you're becoming stronger and stronger and stronger because you know that you can face it, and it's going to be very intense. But like I said, it's just the same thing. It's like not everybody has to go on this journey. They don't. And I think that's really, really important. I don't go around, pitching this life of awareness and spiritual wellness and oh, this is the gate to the other side for you, if it's not. It's kind of like, I was talking to somebody about this before. With all the quote unquote enlightenment that I've experienced and that journey still, like constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly doing, like the be all end all is for me to show up as authentically as I can, and that self-awareness is the experience that I want. Like a lot of people go on a spiritual journey, they think that the goal is to eventually release everything and become a monk. Like, I don't want to fucking become a monk.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not there yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I enjoy the human experience. I like having some wine. I like smoking once in a while. I like wearing like the things that I love wearing. I don't want to release all of this and shave my head and go do the thing. Like, I honor that, and I have my practices that honor who I am from the inside. But like, I don't want, like, my goal isn't to be a monk. So for other people, it can show up in different ways. Like, their goal isn't to be spiritually enlightened. It's just to wake up and feel nice and happy. And you don't need to go down these winding streets and roads and journeys to do that. Like, maybe like your journey is to take care of your family by any means necessary, and like to be with them and be beside them the whole time. Like, that's amazing. Like, you can go and figure that out in many different ways. It doesn't have to be this like ego death, releasing identities, leaving everything behind me kind of journey. And like, I think it's just really important to mention that, like, if you're happy and you're chill, like, you won, you're good. For me, that journey just went deeper because of what my journey's been like. And so, understanding the depths of my inner world have been super profound, and those have unlocked things that have brought up a lot of authenticity and self-awareness that I couldn't escape from once they showed up. And so when I first started doing all of this, and this journey for me has been since I was a child, but I already was committed to this journey from the very beginning, not because it was my identity for a good 20 years, it was just my own personal journey. And I just was like learning more about myself and experiencing different things and challenging different things and understanding emotions in different spaces. And so, I think to each their own. And I think people have to be a little bit more compassionate with themselves about whatever that looks like for them.
I think the really important part is what you ended on, what works for them. And we're all individuals. I don't think that everybody needs to sell all their shit and grab a backpack and move to Southeast Asia and travel around for a couple years. If that's something that calls to you, do it. But for me, it was just the right thing. It was what I needed. And it's about leveraging what we needed to help others find what they need. Over these last couple years as a transformational guide, obviously you're working with people at great depths, people who have gone through great pain and are making these great changes. What are some of the things from your own practices that you help teach other people? Do you use meditation? Do you use embodiment? What are some of the tools in your proverbial tool basket here?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely mindful practices to calm the body, right? Like the nervous system itself, and then also the mind. So that definitely helps. I personally go through a guided visualization practice, so I offer visualization programs for people, and that looks differently for other people. Sometimes it's to strengthen intuition, sometimes it's to connect with what they even really want, sometimes it's to heal some traumas and to release some emotions and things like that. And so that's definitely depending on the person. Definitely my tool belt. I also do meditations for people as well, and so we'll center in at the beginning of these meetings, because people get so rushed around. They're like, oh, okay, I got my session in 5 minutes and I gotta have the coffee and I gotta sit and I gotta put my stuff out. And it's like, so no matter what, I always just take a moment and honor the person for showing up and just kind of like ease into that flow. And then from there, really, it's just I have a structured framework of questions that I ask before I start with everybody, and it tackles different aspects of their life, depending on why they showed up. But generally, I like to get it really clean because everything affects the rest. You might want to come to me for work, but we also need to focus on your relationships. And you might want to come to me for, various situations. They could be about your relationships, they could be about your emotions, about your communication, they could be about, things like that. So I usually always start from there. I have a series of questions to really understand the person. And then really I just sit and talk and ask questions about different things that I notice that connect from one to the other. And then I just explore, and then based on those awarenesses that show up, we start crafting our sessions and programs together. And at the end of every session, there'll always be action steps. I stop doing workbooks and homework and stuff like that. I go from sessions to integration because I found that my clients don't want homework. Right? They don't want a workbook that they can do on their own. They're very present with you at that time. A lot of my clients are very, very busy, and they're putting the time aside to do it with me. So it's very tailored to the person that I'm talking to, and it just goes back to what I was saying before. I have an understanding of frameworks that I work with when it comes to self-awareness and harmony and compassion and relationships and integration, and these types of pillars in essence that I use that are based under my philosophy. And so as they show up, I lean into those pillars because they show up differently. It's not like, well, first we go to here and then we go to here. No, sometimes people are very compassionate but not self-aware enough. You know what I mean? And so some people are very good at integrating but need to learn what harmony looks like through integration. And so I don't look at them as these structures because everyone's in a different place. But ultimately it's about understanding what their starting point is. Having that first conversation, that first session is the most important one. And then I can craft things accordingly. And so like I said, I give them tools and activities to do, to integrate. Not activities like writing down, but it's okay, so now moving forward, step into one situation, one conversation where you challenge what somebody says. A lot of people pleasers out there, they just want to make the space really comfortable, right? In a compassionate way, but challenge something just to feel what it feels like to say, I might have a different opinion than you, right? That's one approach to one of those things. And so it varies. But there's a process and a method that I use, but not necessarily a structure, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. We all have different methods. We all have different practices, right? And what I talk about a lot is a proverbial toolbox. And what I use is different than what you use. And as guides or coaches or whatever term resonates with you, it's up to you to have that level of awareness of what even is in my toolbox. What are the things that I can pull from? How can I help this person? And then applying that to each individual, right? What I hear coming from you a lot is there are a lot of cookie cutter programs. Almost every coach that's out there marketing says, I have this program where we do this. There are a lot of workbooks, stuff like that. People that resonates with, that's great. I resonate as well, and that the people that I work with don't have time for a fucking workbook. They don't care to do a workbook. They care about coming down and having this mirror held for them so that they can sit there and have the conversations with themselves that they weren't ready to have yet.
Exactly.
As a coach, that's my biggest goal beyond anything else. Yes, I have a program. Yes, I have this. Yes, I have that. But let's get people aligned. Let's get people in themselves. For me, the terminology I use is connecting with values. Let's come to this place of self where how can you step into that role. So coming out of your time where you let go and committed to being lazy and had that exploration for yourself, how did you step into this role to start guiding others?
So I've had spaces like this before the significant, release of life. I worked in fashion for about 20 years or so. And then the latter part of that journey, I was consulting for brands, but I would always work with the decision makers. So the entrepreneur, the designer, the C-suite team, whatever the case was. And so while I was having these conversations, if people know me, these conversations just show up about life and relationships and emotions and like just through general conversation, like it always has. And so after the meetings, because also brand was very much about emotions and personality and lifestyle and how to like, you know, connect with the people that like have the lifestyle that you want. And so it's a lot of psychology there. And so the conversation would show up. And then slowly, I had some of the entrepreneurs or the people that I was working with be like, hey, like, can we just go for coffee and just chat? Because you said a few things that kind of like struck me and I'd love to like explore that a little bit more. And I was like, yeah, of course. Because for me, like, I only work with friends. I know people like don't work with friends. I'm like, I only work with friends. People I develop relationships with over time. And so we would sit down and chat. And then they'd be like, so I'd like to keep this going. How do we do that? And so that kind of started showing up already like in my life as like, because it's who I am. I can't turn that off. But people started gravitating towards me more for those kind of purposes. So I was in the business space, so like I used to call it mindset strategy. I used to call myself a mindset strategist. And I want to like give some appreciation to exactly what you're saying. Like, you know, you said it briefly, but it's like whatever term you want, right? Whatever serves, because the transformational guide thing, also to some extent, people will look at and be like, bro, that's full of shit. You just named, you took something out of your ass and you're just like, you're calling that now. And that might change over time, but like you said, it's what you do, right? I just look at it in like market trends and being like, what do I want to like lean into and what I want to lean away from based on what I'm seeing as a whole. So that's the reason why I've chosen those words, but there's nothing, you know, like I said, mindset strategist, conscious coach, transformational guide. At the end of the day, it's your process and the results that you get and how you're able to show up for your clients. But yeah, so then that's really kind of where that started. And then when I disappeared from the world for a while, I told myself I'd go for 3 months. 3 months turned to 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 14 months. And there were processes there where I had to like keep on challenging myself. But it was interesting because I got to a place on my journey where I started offering, I was with a couple of friends. So I've been doing guided visualizations like for probably about a good 30 years of my life now. Being guided from like meditate, like other people or YouTube or, you know, like learning how to, you know, and then eventually that led into me extending those guided visualizations into like my own flows, guiding myself. And that led into just guiding myself. And then I was sitting with a couple of friends. So when I disappeared after a while, I moved to Dahab. I was living in Dahab, Egypt for a while. And I sat down one day and these two friends of mine were talking about their futures and like, you know, what they want to do and everything. And I was like, hey, would you mind going into a meditation flow with me? Just for fun. And so I got in through this thing and obviously everyone's eyes are closed, mine as well. So I don't know what's going on, whether it's a great experience or whether they've fallen asleep on me. I don't really know at this point in time. And then when we opened up our eyes, we came back into the space, like they were like full emotional release, like super euphoric, like very like based on the flow that I took them on was meant to be something, you know, profound like that. And then so because those conversations afterwards, they're also closing circles. It's not like, all right, cool, I'll see you later. Yeah. Right? It's like, okay, like, so what showed up for you? And like, how are you feeling about that? Because sometimes when we feel super euphoric, the come down is depressing. And it's like, fuck, like that was something that happened in my mind, quote unquote. And it's like, but I'm not connected to that. Now I feel less than, and I feel like I'm not going to achieve it. It's like, there's a lot of dynamic that goes there. But those conversations started opening up. And I feel that when you're in alignment with yourself and you share and you really like hold space in whatever capacity, professional, whatever relationships, things that connect with you that resonate will always show up. That's how this world works. It's how your phone works. People are like, oh, the law of attraction. Like your phone is the law of attraction, literally. Your phone emits a frequency that connects to another frequency in a satellite, and then you have a full connection and you have information flows back and forth. Same thing goes with us. We're all made of the same stuff. It's all made of the same stuff. So when you embody certain types of emotions or frequencies and like you really kind of put in the work to understand the dynamics there, so what ended up happening, the reason why I say that is because I started doing those programs, like sessions that turned into programs, because I started offering it to more people and then bigger groups and stuff. And then people started working with me there. A client that I worked with ages ago randomly sends me a message. Hey, Yossi, I see where you're at. Because at that point in time, I think, by that time it was like August. So I was off social media for about 7 or 8 months during this journey of mine. I remember I downloaded it 5 months in and just left it. I didn't even open the app, like my apps. And then a few months later, I started like feeling like I wanted to just share like where I was and like, you know, the things that I was doing. And so she was like, hey, I'd love to start working with you again, right? And this is from my fashion days. But the same, she's an entrepreneur that I work with on so many aspects of her life. And then we started working together, and then I just kept on sharing and doing more and like opening up myself. And you know, there's a George Bernard Shaw quote that says, I don't believe in circumstances. The people that get on in this world are the people who look for the opportunities that they want, and if they can't find them, make them. And I totally believe that, and that's absolutely my flow for my life. And so I started opening up conversations and sharing different kinds of content, and I started putting myself out there in Facebook groups, and then I started doing, you know, I started moving around. I moved to Vietnam and I started doing wellness festivals. I did the first wellness festival in Hoi An, and then I was like, okay, so I'll do these meditations there. And then I started reaching out to coworkers and I started doing talks, and then I got invited to a retreat and I was doing my meditations and my talks. And then I just did the Hoi An Wellness Week as part of Vietnam Nomad Fest for global nomads around the world. And so I just keep on opening up these spaces so people can see me. I think the most profound thing for me right now is that I don't get paid for what I do anymore. I get paid for who I am. And that way I can always show up in super authenticity, and there's a lot more, accountability there. It's no longer on the course that you took, or what you do, or the connections in your network, or the opportunities that don't come, you know what I mean, that don't come to you. It's like, people are paying me to be me. So I need to fucking make sure that I know who the fuck that is all the time, and challenge the things and make space for myself sometimes if I'm going into some evolution, to be like, I need some time right now to really understand this, because my clients are, you know, they challenge. Things are challenging for them. So they challenge things as a way of processing them. And during those challenges, I learned so much from my clients, because it brings up so much awareness in me that I do sit with. And I'll show my clients also, like the last session we had, you mentioned something that really made me reflect. And I really, really appreciate that you were vulnerable enough to share with me your process, because it inspired my process so deeply. Like, this is a forever thing. This is not like I'm better than other people, you know? And I think that people get into this like, I'm the guide and I don't need guidance, right? Like, I'm the coach and I know all the things, I don't need the coaching, or, you know, whatever the case is. And I think that being humble and self-aware with the fact that we're all trying to figure it out is the most important thing at any level. Like, you might be at a deeper level of awareness, you might have more tools than somebody else, but at the same time, you have to be very mindful of the fact that like, you're also growing and you're also uncovering things. You know, there was this one influencer that was like she's a relationship coach, and she constantly talks about red flags and red flags and red flags, huge following. And then news broke out that her husband was cheating on her. And instead of being human and saying, even I miss things sometimes, and I should probably look over some things, and maybe perhaps, you know, she just didn't even talk about it and moved on to more red flags and more this and more that. And it's like, where's the humanness in this? You know, like, it's become so robotic, and it's like, it's just really important to be very, not humble in a way to take away from who you are, but very like humble in the space of like knowing that like how wonderful you are, and knowing that there's still so much to go as an inspirational point, not as a lack point.
The really important takeaway that I get coming out of that as well is we're all in this together, right? I am not above you, I am not behind you, I am beside you. And I have the ability to coach because I had years of mental health struggle. I had years of addiction issues. I had years where I was in a bad relationship. I was also in a great relationship. I was in a job, I lived a life, and I have takeaways to share with that. that doesn't mean I'm any less going through things. My life still has problems. And it's that genuine human connection, that being authentic, is such a resonant piece in your message. And it just rings so true that you are who you are. You show up with what you have gone through and what you're going through. And in that, you're able to find common ground with the people that you're helping.
Appreciate that, man. And yeah, I mean, even at the wellness retreat that I just put on, at the cacao ceremony that first night, I let everybody know, I'm like, I'm here with you all, and you're gonna probably see me cry, and you're gonna probably see me shatter. And like, yes, I've curated this week, and the facilitators are, you know, we're all like educators, and we're at the levels that we're at. I'm like, but this doesn't take away that I'm here for experiences too. And things will show up. And I wanted people to be aware of that, so that when they saw me having an experience, which I did in a few of the different sessions, it was like they see me. They're not like, oh no, what's happening? Is Yossi okay? Like, I thought it was like he's at this other level, and that like we're, you know, it's like maybe I want people to feel safe, to know like, no, I'm going through my stuff too. And like there's a lot of things in my life that are showing up that I'm gonna sit with as well. And when it did happen, people were like, very compassionate, and they were like, oh, he's human, not like, oh, I thought he has everything together, like he should be totally okay now, like why would he cry? There was a situation where one of our facilitators during the breathwork had like a very big emotional and physical release. They were contorting and they were releasing a lot of tears and a lot of emotions, and one person from my team came over to me and they were like, isn't that so-and-so that's putting on that session? And I said, yeah. And they go, are they okay to do it? And I said, that's exactly why they're okay to do it. Because they're releasing and they know the process, and that they feel safe here to be able to do what they need to do to continue evolving as who they are. I said, that's exactly why they're here doing what they're doing.
So earlier you mentioned success and how for everybody that's different. For you as a person, over the next 5 years, what does success look like for you? 5 years from now, if you look back and you go, I have made it, I have done it, what would be the points?
I think that's fair. I think it's a valid question, man. I think that for me, I'm beyond a space of success anymore, and I'm way more in alignment with fulfillment. And I guess people would say the same thing, but like, for me, and I'll define it. So for me, success are like the accolades and the money and the like things in my life. And don't get me wrong, I love my comforts. I really enjoy nice places and nice food. And when I say nice food, I mean like I can find like an epic noodle spot in a random side street in Hanoi and be like, oh, I'm so happy that I was able to like find this place. Like my comfort don't come with a monetary fee, but I also like my comforts. I like my things. And that has money attached to it, of course. But I think that for me, it's feeling fulfilled, knowing that I'm showing up who I am, doing the best that I can. And, you know, I heard something a little while ago that really struck with me, and it said, there's a fine line between self-care and self-sabotage. And so as long as I'm very mindful of that line, and I'm leaning into self-care when I need it, and not self-sabotage for whatever reasons that is, I feel really aligned with the fulfillment of holding spaces and serving others in their processes, in experiencing as much as I possibly can on this planet still, whether it's through new people, or new travels, or new food, or new so on and so forth. I like new things. Not like shiny new, but I just like new experiences and new things. So I think that for me, to maintain a level of financial comfort, to be able to experience myself in as many ways as I possibly can, connecting with beautiful human beings and being able to express myself in as authentically as I can. I think that for me, that's what that looks like. From a business perspective, from a business lens, so people don't think that I'm just sitting here full of shit, I want to be putting on more retreats. I want to create more awareness for people in the spaces that I'm in, because a lot of people are full of shit and a lot of people are cashing in on emotions is a big thing right now. So I can be an emotional coach. Spirituality is a big thing. Wellness is a big thing. So everyone's trying to see these as like trends in the market. And so my intention with every retreat or festival that I do, and with every one-on-one client, is to create awarenesses where they understand why they feel safe and when they need to be very discerning about the spaces that they're entering. Because I think that there's a lot of toxicity out there across the board. And so if I can create experiences that hold safe space for people to connect with themselves, to profoundly change their lives by leaning into self-awareness and radical authenticity, for me, that is the most wonderful, fulfilling space, because that's elevating the consciousness of the collective. And whether that's one person or whether that's an entire festival full of people, I think that guiding people through that with compassion and deep knowledge is really important. So whenever I bring anybody on to my team to facilitate or do anything, for an example, they have to be educators first. And so I'll give a very simple example. In the wellness space, there's a lot of people who do sound healing. And a lot of people like going to sound healings these days. But too often, people that are doing sound healing bowls or whatever will get people to like sit down, head facing the bowls, feet facing the other way, and then they'll just start playing. And although that can create wonderful experiences for people, I make sure the people that I work with sit down and they say, so this is why sound healing works. This is why I'm using 4 bowls instead of 8 or plus. This is why I'm using crystal versus copper. These are the experiences you might feel because these are the frequencies that I'm going to be using. That's how you create a safe space for people, because they understand the process and they're open to receiving whatever shows up because they feel supported. And that's the same for anything that I do. I think that for me, that's true fulfillment. And so, yeah, being able to live in my comforts and really enjoy my life and be able to take care of the people that I love. I'm still striving to a space where I can give back as much as I've received. I have wonderful parents, an incredible family, so many people that have like trusted me and have seen the most incredible things. Like, I haven't had much haters in my adult life. What's driven me is how much people have seen me and how much people just will help me as many ways as they can to like share this message in my energy spaces and things like that with other people. So I'd love to be able to give back as much as I've been given. And I don't think I'll ever be able to properly reciprocate the value that I feel in what I've received. But financially, to be in a space where I can do that from a space of taking care of myself and my comforts and also showing my appreciation for others, whether it's, in whatever form that shows up, and then doing what I can to just like elevate the consciousness of the collective. Because all the spaces there, all the experiences and connections and conversations are so fulfilling for me. So yeah, I stopped putting a number amount on things, and I just started looking at like what would serve me, what would I like to experience, what I need in my life, and then just letting whatever that is to show up in the ways that it does, while focusing on building opportunities and business and things like that. I'm not, at a place where I don't believe that I'm above and beyond that. I just feel like there's many ways to achieve things, and financially is only one of those ways.
So typically people get a list of my questions to have an idea of where I'm coming from, where I'm going, and you asked to not do that because you wanted to be present in this moment. This is the one question I ask every time, and I know that you're going to have a very unique take on it.
Okay.
For people who are just looking to get into coaching or becoming a transformational guide, where would you tell them to start?
By putting in the work first. Absolutely. I think that it's wonderful to read books and set into courses and programs, But I believe that there's a lot of life experience that is needed there. I would highly recommend to look at yourself first and kind of like treat yourself as your first client. Put yourself through the ringer, put yourself through not the learning of the processes and principles, but like if you have workbooks, put yourself through those workbooks. If you have an ideal client, then like put yourself through and really understand the depth of what people are going to experience through the things that you're going to offer. I think that's fundamentally the most important thing, because then you also realize like, oh, my process isn't with workbooks because I don't like fucking doing workbooks. So how can I guide somebody through a workbook process when I don't even resonate with that? Because if you don't resonate with it, you won't understand the depths of that process to be able to hold space and guide people through that process. Maybe it is, and that's how you shine. I have no idea. But I would first and foremost say, if you're gonna get into coaching, then make sure that you put yourself as your first client and really lean in, because you'll know where you're like not comfortable taking yourself. And I think that that is a very important awareness to have, especially if you expect to take people into places that they're not comfortable with going with themselves. I think that's super important.
Absolutely. A term that gets thrown around a lot is that your ideal client is yourself from 3 years ago. That way it's experiences that you have already been through. How does that sit with you?
I think it goes in line to what I'm saying. I mean, I think that there are people going through things that I haven't gone through, but I think that the awareness and perspective of what that journey looks like is important. Would my ideal client be me? Yeah, I would say that's where I have the most to give, the most perspective to share. And like I said, like, yeah, I mean, for me, I was super lost. And my journey took me from lost to aligned and empowered. You know, aligning yourself and then leaning in through integration to empower yourself in those spaces are things that I truly believe has been the journey of my life. It's just been a lot more apparent in my adult life because I have the language and I have the tools and I have the awareness of the experience, and you know, looking forward, it's really shaping the things that are you know, my movements and things like this. So I don't know if it's for everyone like that, but I would say that for me, based on what I'm doing now, absolutely. Even my guided visualizations were serving me, and I'm using those to serve people. Even the festivals and retreats that I do, they're very mindfully curated based on my awarenesses and things that you know, I feel really serve different dynamics. And even in the one that we met at, you know, I showed up to everything as much as I could, because festivals have their dynamics and I had to step away a couple of times, but I showed up to everything because like I wanted to be there. And I know how important it was for other people to step into those spaces because they were safe and they were understood.
So Yossi, how can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
Well, you can connect with me on my website, yossifisher.com. You can find me on Instagram at Yossi_Fisher. If you pretty much type in Yossi Fisher and you now know what I look like, I'm pretty much the only one that shows up. So you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn as well. My website's a really good place to start because it lays out my philosophy, it lays out my pillars, and it talks about my story. So I think that would be a really good place to start. You can connect with me through my website. And then through my socials, I love connecting with people, and like, you know, I share a lot of information and knowledge there, and also like my journey, like any reel on my Instagram that people see, it was pretty much me talking to myself that day, and I felt that like if it helped me, then it would probably help other people. So super authentic and real. Yeah, those would be the best places. And then if you ever see me in person, also a great place to find me is exactly where you find me. You come say hi, and you know, and I'm always happy to go for coffee or sit down and, you know, hear something somebody would like to share with me.
Yeah, and for those of you that are interested, there will be links in the comment section below. Yossi, my brother, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story today.
Thank you very kindly for your patience with me, because I know that my conversations are sometimes a little triggering and different than most people. But I honor the questions and your intention behind everything that you share with me today also. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, I honor the space very much, so yeah.
Hell yeah. Get in here.